So here it is, YouTube. I'm Roadhawk Wilson, welcoming you into my home, and I wanted to discuss briefly the most important sibling rivalry in all of the MCU, and that is Loki and Thor. And with Thor 4, Love and Thunder being announced, and a lot of people wondering where Loki is going to be in this story, there's a lot to discuss in the actual relationship between Loki and Thor, and I can pull from comics and I can pull from the MCU to illustrate this. But in the comics, Loki and Thor are much more antagonistic towards each other. In fact, Tumblr has a history of taking the story of Loki being a snake that tries to essentially kill Thor and animating it into cute and adorable elements. However, the actual reality of this relationship is one of toxicity, hatred, and downright evil. As you look at Loki throughout the course of the MCU, you could say yes, in Avengers he was easily under the control of Thanos, but he wasn't really doing anything he didn't want to do. In fact, his own free will and his desire to destroy his brother was rather prevalent. It's not until you get into the elements of Thor Ragnarok and really Avengers Infinity War that you discover Loki's ambitions are far less malicious and more kind of comedic, in the sense he just truly embodies the trickster god element and uses his power in order to manipulate and trick those he loves, leading to the ultimate argument that Loki is still alive somewhere out there. However, the ultimate discussion of these two characters is that they have a brotherhood, they have a friendship, but they consistently and will most likely continue to try to kill each other because the familial bond that they feel, and this is why it's so important, it is very similar to a lot of people's situation. They grow up in the shadow of their big brother or the shadow of their little brother or sister, and an antagonistic and very human thing happens between Loki and Thor. If you look at the Thor in the movie Thor, he's a arrogant, selfish, bigoted kind of character, and I say that because he throughout the movies has some biases towards different races and is more than willing to kill them in order to still serve his own needs. However, it's not until his own brother that he sees that in Thor Ragnarok, Loki never has these opportunities to change. He never comes out of himself. And much like many sibling relationships in the real world and in life in general, siblings choose to not grow up. They choose to remain who they are, and that's a very human thing for us to get caught in our selfishness and in our own desires and begin to resent and anger those that we love because of our own selfishness. And it's ultimately why the relationship between Thor and Loki is so important, because it explains what is very rare in the MCU, and that is actually a familial relationship that is built on distrust, hatred, and greed, and a representation of, well, yes, many families do not have this, and throughout the MCU there are many different examples of a healthy, prosperous relationship, but Thor and Loki continue to show us what it is to have a dysfunctional, angry, violent family, one that represents many people in the world, and one that represents many people's desires to overcome that and ultimately hope for something better. And it's actually a scene in Infinity War where Loki supposedly sacrifices his own life for Thor and for the redemption of his people, that it gives us this scene of Loki and Thor finally making peace and becoming true brothers. It's often in life through our sacrifice and through our own ability to overcome our less than ideal personality traits that we really become real family, and we acknowledge the people in our lives as the worth that they were. And it's ultimately that Loki sacrificing himself, that his overall arcing arc really gives us the redemption and the love that we've never seen in the MCU until that point. And it's ultimately why it's so important that Thor and Loki's relationship represents a relationship that can be toxic, that can be malicious, that can be violent, but it can ultimately overcome that and become something more meaningful and ultimately something beautiful and meaningful to not just Loki but Thor himself. With that, guys, I'm Roadhawk Wilson. I know this is a brief video. You can only cover so much in a 5-minute and 30-second video. But with that, I will say keep up the nerd stuff. Keep up what keeps you happy. Stay healthy, be healthy, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.